Hi everyone, so in today's video I'm going to show you the things that I have done to make this Bandai Kamado Nezuko plastic model kit figurine look much better than a straight out of the box build. There's a lot of things for me to go through, so I have provided some timestamps in the description below so that you can navigate to the things you want to see without having to go through the video from start to finish. There's lots to do, so let's get started. So the way I've organized the video is such that I'm going to show you what I have done on the Nezuko figurine first before I assemble the particular section that I'm talking about. So we are going to begin now with Kamado Nezuko's head. So the eyes and eyebrows and eyelashes that you see on the face here all have been printed and by Bandai, and it came pre-painted with the part. The things that I did to make it look better were to place some shadows on her cheek as well as her neck. Now this I did using a product from Tamiya, which is the Tamiya Weathering Master line of products, which are kind of dry pastels which you can brush onto the model. So the particular color that I used was peach, which is kind of a rosy pink. Meanwhile, for the red shadows on her ear, as well as a slight red coloring on her lips, which are very faint, so that her lips were outlined. This I did using a different product, which is the Mr. Weathering Color Filter Liquid, particularly the glaze red color. Apart from that, the bamboo shoot that Nezuko bites on, I didn't paint it other than to paneline the grooves using another Mr. Weathering Color product, specifically the ground brown WCO2 paint. Meanwhile, for these strips of clothing that hold the bamboo shoot to a mouth, I use the stained brown color to paneline it. And as for the ribbon bow that is on her head, I use the multi-gray Mr. Weathering Color paint. So these then are the things that I had done to the face and the parts that come together with the head in order to improve the overall look on the face and head. So now let's proceed to the assembly process for Nezuko's head. So laid out on the work mat here are the parts that will make up Nezuko's head. So they are her facial features as well as the parts that are on her face, which I had shown earlier, as well as the various strands of hair which are in black and orange. Now these hair parts, I intend to do some work on it, but I will only do it after I have fully assembled the head, because only after assembly will I be able to see where the highlights or shadows are. So now let's begin by assembling the hair pieces for Nezuko. It's a very cool way that Bandai have laid out the hair assembly process, in which each part fits into a specific niche. All the parts are numbered and go exactly where they are supposed to go, and the overall effect will be to show the various strands of hair waving around as if they are being blown by the wind. As I mentioned earlier, the parts of the hair, I believe I will do a little bit of painting on them, but honestly I don't think so there's much I can do to make it look that much better. But I suppose something is better than nothing. So let's proceed on with the assembly of Nezuko's face. Let's begin by putting on that bamboo shoot that she bites on. Now, the way the story goes is that I believe she bites on that bamboo shoot to prevent her from actually eating humans. Like it sort of lowers her tendency or her desire to consume human meat. So I guess you will have to see the anime to understand what I'm talking about. So anyway, that's the bamboo shoot placed onto these stripes of clothing that will eventually hold it in place over her mouth. Now this is the back half of her head. And that stripes of clothing attaches to the insides of the back of the head. It looks like it attaches to a hinge-like joint which will allow that bamboo shoot to be lowered from her mouth if needed, like so. So that's the bamboo shoot and the strips of clothing holding it in place attached to the back of her head. Following this, I'm going to attach her neck onto the back of her head. This also will secure that strips of clothing and the bamboo shoot and prevent it from falling out of Nezuko's head. With that done, we will now attach it to the hair sub-assembly that we have finished so far. The head seems to be attached to the hair at a slight angle, as if she's tilting her head. Just let me check to see whether that is exactly the angle that is correct. I believe it is so I'll just leave it in place for now. But just to be sure, I think I'll just double check to see if I got the angle right. Based on the grooves that are inside that hair assembly, I don't believe there's any other way to place the back of Nezuko's head. But I'm just checking the instruction pamphlet to see whether I've got it right. So that's the back of her head in place into the hair assembly, and I'll leave it like that for now, and I'll know for sure if I'm right in later on. Next up is the sides, the hair on the sides of her head, which attach on only after the back of Nezuko's head have been fixed in place. As both strands of hair on the sides of her head attached onto Nezuko's head, so I will now proceed to place her face onto the back of the head. It goes in via this square peg and hole. So So now once that is securely in, I will place her bangs onto the top of her forehead, like so. As you can see, that bamboo shoot can be swiveled up onto her mouth. So the final thing that's left to do is to place that ribbon bow, that light salmon pink ribbon bow, onto her head, or hair rather. So that is the assembly for Kamado Nezuko's head completed. With the assembly now finished, I'll see what I can do to make her hair look just that little bit better, or at least to see if I'm able to do so. In terms of the final results that I got from painting and panel lining Nezuko's clothing, I was very much happier with what I had achieved compared with what I had done on her hair. Let me now take you through what I did, starting with the sash around her waist. The checkered pattern on the sash around her waist I had painted in red. First, I started off with a base of citadel black, followed by a Vallejo model color deck tan. This provided a good base onto which I layered on a mixture of carmine red and red, also from Vallejo model color, to achieve the red that you see there. Meanwhile, the green belt that holds the green and orange belt that holds her sash onto her waist, both these belts I had first primed with Mr. Base White 1000 before using an intermediate green Vallejo color to paint that light green, and I shaded it with a citadel shade. For the orange, I used Vallejo light orange, followed by a sepia citadel wash. Both washes gave some definition to the belts that I painted. Meanwhile, for Nezuko's kimono, I had made the pattern stand out by using Mr. Weathering color multi-gray to panel line the grooves that form the pattern on her kimono. So this then is all the work that I did for Nezuko's clothing. So I will now proceed to assemble Nezuko's clothing. Having painted and panel lined the sections of Nezuko's kimono and clothing that I needed to do, I will now start assembling her clothing together. So let's begin by putting the inner pieces together. Now the checkered pattern you see on her back here have not been painted because it will eventually be covered up by her cloak. I begin by placing this inner connector piece into the back of her inner clothing. This allows the front portion that contains the checkered pattern sash to connect to the back piece securely. as you see me doing here now. It also acts as a hole for the legs to eventually be inserted into her clothing, as I will show you much later. So now we move on to the pink kimono pieces. There are 4 of them: the front and back of the bottom half of the kimono, which I just attached here, as well as this white sash that you see here. So this completes the bottom half of Nezuko's kimono. This then is the back part of the upper half of her kimono, followed by the front half. So that's the kimono complete. Well, not fully complete yet, because I have yet to place the belts onto the checkered pattern sash, starting with that green belt. I had painted it, repainted it, and not used the molded color, because the correct green color is actually much lighter than what came with the molded plastic. Similarly, that orange belt that you see me putting on now, I had to paint it because the original molded plastic color was red. So the color accuracy was off, so I had to paint it in a light orange. So that's Nezuko's kimono done. Now I will begin to put together her cloak, which will surround most of her kimono, especially her back. Let's start off with the shoulder pieces first. This particular piece will cover the right side of her kimono. Now, as I'm holding that piece on to the kimono, I will attach the back of her cloak and snap the 2 pieces together. It is essential that you hold that shoulder piece onto the kimono, or it might come loose before the cloak can attach to it. Holding this, we will attach the shoulder or side piece on the left in the manner that I'm doing now. Once that's done, there's only one last piece of her cloak left, which is actually another part of the bottom half of her cloak, specifically on the left side of Nezuko. Wait, just let me get the connections done properly so that the seams don't show as much. So that then is the cloak assembled. Let me just blow off the dust particles that have landed on her cloak. The seam lines seem a bit unseemly, but I guess it's not as bad as it would seem. Now I seem to have forgotten a nub mark at the front of her cloak, so I'll have to nip this off before I can proceed further with the other sections of Nezuko. So let's do that now. To remove that nub mark from the front of Nezuko's cloak as cleanly as possible, I'm going to use this God hand nipper. It has very sharp blades that give less stress to the plastic as you are cutting it. Like so. Now there's still some scratch marks on it, which I'll try to cut away using a hobby knife. Now I'm not working from an ideal angle, as I have to film this process while I'm doing it. So I'm not getting results that I usually get. So the resulting scratch or cut marks at the front of a cloak would be an eyesore, in my opinion. So I'll have to paint over it so that the marks that were caused by me cutting off the nub will become less visible. So let's do that now. Let's paint over those marks so that they become less visible. Now, in order to remove the unsightly nub marks that resulted from me cutting off the nubs from the front of a cloak, I had actually used an unorthodox way. I used Mr. Weathering color paint to conceal the marks. Now, to show you how I did it, I'm going to do the same thing on the marks on the shoulder. I'm going to use a specific color called shade brown, Mr. Weathering color product. Now first I will apply this, I believe it is an enamel based paint. I will apply it onto the marks like so. It doesn't matter if you didn't do it smoothly or it's just lumps of paint on top of the marks. As I will show you later, it can be smoothed out using either a cotton bud or some tissue. So before the paint dries up completely, you can take a tissue or a cotton bud, as is in my case, and wipe over the area that you had painted earlier. Now don't wipe too hard, but enough so that most of the paint that you applied on it are removed, and whatever is left is blends nicely onto the plastic, so that there is a smooth transition and you don't see a huge blotch of paint in the middle of the cloak. So that then is how I repaired the nub marks that were caused by cutting the nubs from the cloak. So that is Nezuko's clothing finally completed, more or less. There's still some sections of her cloak around her arms, as well as some clothing around her ankles which have yet to be assembled. But for the most part, Nezuko's clothing is done. So let's proceed to the next part. Before I go on to assemble Nezuko's arms and legs, I will first show you what I did to make the details look better. Now, as I've shown earlier, all the nub marks that were found on Nezuko's cloak were very visible. Thus, I did a similar cover-up process using Mr. Weathering color shade brown. This I had shown you earlier. So this particular cover-up paint I did for all the brown clothing, the rest of Nezuko's brown clothing. Now, other than the brown clothes and other parts of her clothing, I also put some light grayish or multi-gray paint using Mr. Weathering color multi-gray paint to panel line the ribbon bows that are found around her ankle. Apart from that, I use Tamiya Weathering Master to give some shading to Nezuko's knees as well as the back of her knee using two colors, a combination of two colors, salmon and ivory, to give it a more lifelike look to her skin. Now this is to the back of her knee. Now for the subsequent parts that I painted using Vallejo model color paint, I first put a base of citadel black followed by Vallejo deck tan before, for example, painting her sandals with the old rose color, like what you see here. As well as to paint her fingernails. Now, the grooves between her hands, I had used a Mr. Weathering color product called light grayish, so that to better define the individual fingers. The nails, as I mentioned earlier, I painted using Vallejo model color Old Rose. Now for the soles of her sandals, I used pink as well as yellow ochre. The pink brown bit actually connects to the stripes on her sandals. And I've given the whole thing a wash of Citadel Sepia so that the details stand out. So that then is the stuff that I did for her limbs. So now let's go on and assemble Nezuko's arms and legs. Now that you know the detailed paintwork as well as panel lining that I have done to Nezuko's arms and legs as well as feet, also including the clothing that wraps around her legs as well as arms, let's proceed to the assembly process of Nezuko's limbs. Let's begin by putting together Nezuko's right leg. It begins with the front and the back of her knee attached together from two halves. So these two halves fit together quite tightly. Following that, we are going to put the ankle wrappings onto the leg. We begin first with the brown wrappings. I'm just ensuring everything fits tightly. Before I proceed further on her legs, let's put together the feet. In this instance, Nezuko's right feet. So she's wearing sandals, pink colored sandals with a yellow ochre sole. Her right feet comprises of 3 parts. But first I have to place her toes on first before attaching her heels. I had it on the wrong way round in the first place. So that's Nezuko's right feet completed. It's looking good. So now let's attach it to her right leg. The grooves that you see on her ankle are holes into which those white parts attach, and these are supposed to be the strings or strips of clothing that tie that brown piece of ankle wrap around the bottom half of her leg. Now the back of that so-called strings are the ribbon bows, the white ribbon bows that had been panelined in grey. I love how Bandai had thought this out and made the assembly process very logical with extremely good end results. So that's Nezuko's right leg complete. Let's move on now to her other leg. I'm going to repeat the process that I had done for her right leg, being careful not to wipe away the shading that I have done using the Tamiya Weathering Master pastels. I did not top coat the flesh parts of her leg, so if I rub on the shading too hard, I'm sure the color will come off. For the brown bits around her ankle, I decided not to do any painting other than to touch it up with the shade brown, the Mr. Weathering color shade brown. Nezuko's left foot is assembled in a slightly different way because it is angled in such a way that it looks as if she's standing on tiptoe. But as with the right feet or foot, I will put on the toe first before attaching it to her leg. So essentially Nezuko's left leg consists of only 2 parts as opposed to the 3-parter on Nezuko's right foot. So let's finish off Nezuko's left leg with the white strips of cloth that holds the brown ankle wrapping in place. Those 3 sections differ in size slightly, from big to mid-size to small, so you can never put the wrong strip in the wrong place. In addition, the ribbon bows that are on the back of her ankle have a specific way of being inserted into place so that you don't put it the wrong way around. That is what I can gather from working with them. Let's just put the last ribbon bow in place. So that's Nezuko's left feet. With Nezuko's feet done, I'm moving on now to her right arm, which will be encased in a cloak before being attached to her body. So it's a simple ball joint where 2 halves of the cloak encase her arm, like so. That's the right side, or rather Nezuko's right arm completed. Let's finish things off by completing her other arm. Similar to her right arm, but before that, there's an extra bit of thumb to be attached to her left hand. Her right hand comes fully molded, but her left, we have to attach the thumb onto the hand. I suppose the reason for this is the left thumb is much better defined, so it is a part by itself. And as with the right hand, the arm will be completely encased in 2 halves of the brown cloak, this time for the left side. So this mini base here is actually a mini stand which allows Nezuko's left leg to slot into in order to give her better stability when she's standing. You'll see what I mean when we move on to the final assembly process. So let's get started on that. So here we are now, finally, at the final assembly process for the Bandai Kamado Nezuko plastic model kit figurine. I have completed her limbs, both her arms and legs, her body, which comprises mainly the kimono, as well as her head. So let's start the assembly by attaching her legs onto the kimono, the bottom half of the kimono, via the two holes that you could see. Now the cloak is coming loose. The weak point of the cloak seems to be that last bit there. So her right leg is on. I'm going to follow this up with her left leg. There's a groove that accompanies the ball and joint connection so that you won't mistakenly misalign her legs when you assemble them. There's her cloak coming loose again, but I'll just put it aside first and get her legs in a proper alignment, fitting tightly, before I close her cloak back up again. I guess I could glue this particular section of her cloak together, but I won't do it for now. So that's Nezuko's leg attached. We'll move on to her arms, starting with the left. Should fit in tightly via a square pack into a square hole connection, like so. So that's her left arm and hand, followed by her right arm and hand. So now for the main piece, Nezuko's head, which attaches in a good tight fit. The only piece left is that little mini base that ensures the figurine is stable when placed on her 2 feet. I guess it's a good way to ensure that she will not fall over when displayed. As you can see here, it gives her an extra dimension of stability to prevent her from falling down when she's being posed up on display. So this then is the Bandai Kamado Nezuko figurine from the Demon Slayer anime series, fully assembled with selected sections painted and panelined. Let's move on now to some close-up views as well as 360-degree views to see Kamado Nezuko. Now let's start the 360-degree view of the Bandai Kamado Nezuko figurine from the Demon Slayer anime series by having a close-up view of her facial features as well as the details that are found on her head. So as you can see, Bandai has got it spot on. The resulting plastic model kit figurine very closely resembles the character from the anime series. Bandai did a great job printing out the details in her eyes as well as creating a very dynamic sculpt of her hair. So in terms of the most prominent and important part of the figurine, that is Nezuko's face, Bandai has got it absolutely right. Moving on now, Let's take a look at the upper half of this figurine. Another thing I like about this Bandai Kamado Nezuko figurine is how well done the details of her kimono and rest of her clothing are. But one thing that needs to be noted is that some painting needs to be done, as well as panel lining on her kimono pattern, in order to bring out the details and fully realize the beauty of her kimono and clothing. All in all, Bandai did an excellent job in creating a dynamic look to Nezuko's clothing as well as her kimono. Meanwhile, for the bottom half of the Nezuko figurine, at first, the positioning of her legs struck me as rather odd. It looked as if she was standing in a very awkward way. But you would have to look at this standing pose in its totality, and once you look at Nezuko's standing pose in relation to her way her arms is positioned, then everything looks just about right. This then is the full 360-degree view of the Bandai Kamado Nezuko plastic model kit figurine from the Demon Slayer anime series. Personally, I really love this kit, but there's a caveat in a sense that there are some details that you would need to paint and panel line to ensure that this kit looks as good as it can be. For example, her sandals, the belts, and her sash all need to be painted to ensure color accuracy, and you do also need to panel line the patterns on her kimono, and as well as some of the ribbon bows around her leg and on her head, and as well as put some shading on her flesh to ensure that overall this kit looks as good as the potential contained within it. So would I recommend this kit? Yes, definitely. But as I said, you do have to put a little bit of work into this kit so that its full potential is realized. So I hope you really enjoyed this video on assembling and detailing Kamado Nezuko. If you enjoyed it, please do subscribe to my YouTube channel. And as always, thanks for watching and have a great day.